Chapter 4140. Let me kill the monster. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Good. Now that you have located the enemy, fight him. Why don't you come out and do it in my stead? Noah had been meaning to ask this question because his system had been ordering him around all this time, doing nothing. Shane let out a chuckle. You think my job is easy? Think again. You can take my place any minute. I welcome you with all my heart. Noah shut his mouth as he dashed forward while fighting with the mannequins at the same time. At this time, he didn't fight the puppets like he usually would. He dodged every single one of them as he directly jumped on their heads and dashed straight towards the bushes. His speed was so fast that even Shane was stunned. Wow, I'm so cool. Noah grinned as he used the sword master skill to the full extent. Kill the enemy before boasting. Idiot. Who are you calling an idiot? Noah slashed two more mannequins on the way and was just about to touch the bushes when his arms were grabbed once again, and his body was thrown back in a similar way. F***ck, don't these monsters have another attack other than throwing me like this at all times? Would you mind being killed the next time? Ahem. Noah stood there as he stared at the mannequins who seemed to have gathered around the tree, standing in an erect position to protect something. You do have a plan, don't you? Yes, Shane did have a plan, and it could definitely kill the monster. He stared at the tree with an indifferent glance and said, I can, but you'll have to excuse me for a moment. He had seen that an hour of reset time had ended. So he immediately used the controlling tool and took over the body without any hesitation. Then he opened his mouth and said, my plan depends on your full cooperation with me. Are you ready? What do I have to do? For some reason, Noah became worried after hearing that tone of his system. Shane smiled as he pulled out the ice sword. Just listen to me punctually. He struck it to the ground and froze the mannequins as he rushed to the tree at a fast pace. In the blink of an eye, he jumped toward the bush and suddenly transferred the control back to Noah, who got scared **. Noah. What the? Why did you give me control in the middle of the air? What should I do? Take your katana. Since you have sword master skill, the probability of you killing the monster is higher than mine. Shane spoke, knowing he was dumping all the responsibilities on his host's shoulders. He could have solved it himself by purchasing a sword master skill himself, but he didn't want to because his attribute wasn't physical strength like Noah's. So even if he could, he would probably be able to use it for a few seconds. It was a risky job. So it was better if Noah would perform the task since the latter was a better fighter than him at present. The host said nothing as he attacked that place. As the pointed tip of the katana pierced something hard. After a moment, something fell from the branch to the ground, making a thud echo. Shane glanced at the ground only to see a small mannequin like little faceless boy. The katana had pierced right in the middle of the face. Blood seeped out of the wound as the hands and legs fell limply to the ground. The monster seemed to have died. Noah started at the scene in shock. He glanced at the katana in his hand and grinned. Did you see what I just did? Good job. Now, head over to the east. But, before he could say anything else, the entire ground beneath them started to tremble as if they had just ended up witnessing an earthquake. Shane's expression changed as he said, quick. Move over to the exit. Noah also felt like something was off. He immediately started running in that direction, but before he could continue to rush, a mountain started growing from the bottom of his feet and rose higher and higher to the point that by the time Noah stopped, he was already standing on a cliff. The tree seemed small and he couldn't even see that little boy anymore. Wait, what just happened? Didn't he just kill the controller? Shane also frowned as he glanced in the direction where the boy fell. He immediately pulled out the recording of the past 5 minutes and started to watch it keenly. Just then, he noticed something strange. A thin thread sparked up from the top of the little boy's head and went straight into the ground, merging beneath. His eyes widened when he realized what was happening. The real monster who was controlling the mannequins wasn't that faceless boy but the ground itself. How could he have mistaken this small thing? He took a deep breath to calm himself down as he said, I might have to find a flying skill for you. But he doubted he could get anything because his host's skills were related to physical strength, not air. The shop of the host worked in a different manner. All the hosts could only see the weapons and skills to purchase related to their attributes, unlike the systems. So at this time, Shane wanted to find a pair of feathers that could be used with the combined skill of flying like a bird. He immediately opened the shop before the ground monster could do something worse. After searching, he finally found what he was looking for when he forwarded it to Noah and said, Host, I have found something for you. Purchase and use them immediately. Wait, system. What's that? There was a hint of anxiety in Noah's tone as Shane looked up. The ground on which the cliff was standing cracked open as a monster with deformed face crawled up. Its hands and legs were in the places where they shouldn't be. Its eyes were large with a hint of redness appearing in them. They moved restlessly before stopping at Noah's face before it opened its mouth at the bottom and roared at the loudest voice possible. Noah's eyes widened. He was just about to speak when the monster jumped up and appeared right in front of Noah in a split second. With its hands that were above at the place of its head, it attacked Noah with all its force. The latter's body was thrown back as he hit the trunk of a tree, breaking it into two halves. Blood vomited from Noah's mouth as he worked to open his eyes. Shane glanced at the radar, which indicated that the monster this time was of level 15. He was shocked after seeing this. No wonder this monster looked and attacked like this. He knew he couldn't deal with this. Host, don't even think of finishing it off. You have got to be kidding me, right? Noah wanted to shake his system's shoulders. Wake up. If we don't fight this, how are we going to go ahead? And plus, I have been wanting to test my skills and find out what's better. This monster or the skill? You don't have to do it. Just listen to me. Shut up. Noah wasn't listening anymore. He raised his katana and pointed it at the deformed monster. Just look at how cool I'd look. Shane was the most anxious at this time. He knew that he shouldn't have trusted this stupid high schooler at a time like this, but he also knew he couldn't use any flying skill himself because none of them would help him shorten the distance between himself and the exit in the matter of a few seconds. Should he try a teleportation skill? He wanted to search for it, but there was no time. So he could only grit his teeth and said, fine. Let me King kill it this time. He immediately purchased the controlling tool and took out the kinslayer from his inventory. Chapter 42-41. My dear brother, you are listening at novelfull.audio. He rushed toward the deformed monster and attacked as he slashed the crooked hands first. Then, he aimed for the legs that formed in strange directions, making them walk awkwardly. The monster fell to the ground, having lost his support. It growled angrily and glared in Shane's direction before launching at his face. Even though it didn't have hands, it could still use its mouth to deal with the human. Shane scoffed as if he could tell what the monster was thinking and took a deep breath. Get ready to run. I probably won't be awake for a while. You better wait for me to wake up. If I wake up and find you in trouble, I'll kill you first. Why? Noah asked. Are you going to sleep? Shane didn't answer that question. He could feel his body's limitations being challenged with every second that passed. He should have put down his sword, but the monster wasn't dead yet. So he jumped and slashed the monster into two pieces at an easy pace. Everything happened within a few seconds, and since Shane had overused the weapon just now, the body fell to the ground. He glanced at the monster sleepily and closed his eyes, wondering how long he would be unconscious amid such a critical task. He could only hope his host would not do something ridiculous again. Otherwise, he would be doomed for sure. As he was about to sleep away, his mind drifted off to Dirt sitting outside and his master. They would surely have been disappointed by how he handled things after entering this place. He didn't want to disappoint his master. He fell unconscious as the control of the body went to Noah again. The latter stood there, confused out of his mind. He stared blankly at the dead monster in front of him. The thing that had made him feel afraid died so easily with the help of his system. He genuinely felt grateful for his powerful system at this point. With this thought, he rushed toward the exit. The master Shane was thinking about was in a call with Dirt outside the portal. It was the robot that had initiated the call to inform the bald man of the current situation. So you're saying, the bald man's low voice echoed in the background, while everyone has passed 70.5% of their missions, Shane is still stuck on his first task. Yup. That's too bad, the bald man sighed, I had expected more from him. You can't blame him. It's still an unmatchable feat for him to reach 20% in such a short time. Dirt's voice was especially righteous, it's my fault that put him in such a situation. Well, the bald man's voice stopped all of a sudden before he whispered in an extremely low tone, we'll talk to you later. And then, Ed directly hung up the call without listening to what Dirt was saying. The latter stared at the screen in front of him for a while. He blinked several times as veins popped up on his forehead. If he weren't my master, I'd have grabbed his ears and dragged him back to the institute. He turned toward the portal and sighed, let me just do my work. I'll continue to secure the portal more for assurance. Meanwhile, Ed was nearly caught from the place he was hiding. A giant tree in a garden. He was sitting on a branch on his tiptoes as he sat there like a statue without moving. Not even a leaf twirled in his presence as he even lowered his breathing noise, but his target suddenly showed up in the garden, walking outside her elegant palace filled with fruits, plants, trees, and even a lake. That's right. He was spying on someone, and not just anyone, it was the Oracle Queen, the person who was the only robot alive under the direct control of the system god to control this continent, Luna. Her pink hair waved behind her back as she stood there beneath the same tree where Ed was hiding. She tilted her head as her face was shown clearly to the bald man. The girl was the same lowly who had met Shane and his group before she guided them to the institute. She would never indulge herself in the newbies' matters, but this time, she had made an exception and taken Shane inside the institute with his friends. When Ed found out about this matter, he almost couldn't believe it. That was why he was so concerned about her intentions. And what was behind those intentions, he shouldn't have to research it. It would, of course, be that incompetent system god who was controlling these robots behind the scenes. When Ed thought about how Shane's power was unique, he frowned. Could it be that system god knew about this and deliberately used Luna to find out more about Shane's situation? The more Ed thought about it, the more he felt something. Just then, Luna tilted her head and stared dead at Ed's eyes with an emotionless face. You didn't have to come, Ed Hudson. Ed was stunned for a while, then he chuckled. This wasn't the lowly talking, but the system god. He jumped down as he leaned against the tree and smiled, it's been a long time. It has indeed been a long time, said Luna as she turned toward him with her hands behind her back. What brings you here? Don't tell me you want something from the garden. We aren't kids anymore. Ed sneered, then you should remember this fact in the same manner. Why don't you act like an actual controller of this realm rather than some hidden villain like small kids? What do you want with Shane? Oh. You're jumping on the topic in an instant. Luna smiled, that's more like the Ed I know. Shut the F***ck up. Ed glared at the lowly, tell me, what do you want? You're still the same, caring about irrelevant things. That's why you couldn't take my place back then, said the lowly in her sweet voice. Ed, if time were to rewind, would you regret letting me live? Ed stood there and said nothing. No one knew what he was thinking as he stared at the lowly without blinking and silently opened his inventory. He raised his chin, let's have a duel. Are you sure you can win? Luna smiled and took out her weapon. Its hilt was pink and decorated with laces. Even the size of the sword was pitifully small, making it seem like it was child labor to urge her to fight against a big, bald man like Ed. But the bald man knew what kind of thing Luna was, a robot as advanced as dirt. He couldn't take the lowly casually. He narrowed his eyes and said, "It's not you, and even if it were you, I'd win. After all, I used to always be at the top, my dear brother." Chapter 43-42. I'm just making money. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The weapon Ed used wasn't a simple one. First and foremost, he was a weapon creator and had made all of his weapons himself. Secondly, his own stats crossed all limits. It was said that there were only 2 people at 100 level with full stats and a higher level of luck. One was the system god and another was Ed Hudson, but they both were real, blood brothers with a bad relationship between them. So now that Ed had challenged the system god's robot, Luna, he pulled out his most famous and one of the most powerful weapons against an enemy at close combat. Name: Crescent Luck Level 100 CE. 52 Attribute. Electrical Strength 100 Attack. 93 Physical Resistance. 100 CE Resistance. 43 Luck. 90. The stats window appeared as soon as Ed loaded the sword from the inventory and pulled it out. He glanced at the pinkish sword in the robot's hand and sneered, "Are you sure you can make do with this?" Luna smiled and tilted her head innocently. "Brother, did you forget how powerful Luna is?" Of course, Ed didn't forget, but to actually turn a robot into a puppet without giving her a shred of freedom was simply too inhuman. But then again, his brother didn't have a heart in the first place. He had been long disgusted by that man, and it had turned their relationship into complete ruins. Now that Ed faced off against this person after such a long time, he sighed. If it weren't for his only disciple, he would have never stepped foot inside this palace. He glanced at the pink sword in the robot's hand and grimaced. Even though his level was higher, this kind of weapon was hard to deal with. It was good that Luna's stats weren't even close to his. He glanced at the pink lowly and used a secret skill to view the stats. This skill was also created by him, and the system god was the only other person who could use it effectively. Otherwise, no one was allowed to sneak a peek into another person's stats like this. The robot's full information appeared in front of Ed in a window. Level 59 EXP 8,582,624 Job. Robot.max HP 100/100 max CE 62/100 Attribute. Fire Strength 62 Agility 96 Stamina 66 Intelligence 59 Vitality 65 Attack 70 Skill. Weapons. Physical Resistance 45 CE Resistance 67 Luck 20 Overall Status. Advanced. Ed closed the window instantly. She had leveled up quite a lot since the last time he saw her. The Skills and Weapons tab still remained nil. He knew the reason why it was nil. The robots were allowed to purchase weapons from the system store because they weren't systems, to begin with. But the robots were special since they could use all weapons or skills belonging to that attribute. Since Luna was a fire attribute, she could use all the weapons and skills. Then he glanced at the pink sword in her hand. He didn't need to see the stats of that thing because the level of the sword couldn't exceed that of Luna's current level and strength since it was created out of her own body. His mere stats were enough to defeat her. After that, he closed the window and said, "Let's start." "What are you waiting for? Weren't you seeing Luna's stats?" The robot tilted her head innocently. "TCH. You know me so well." Ed flicked the sword in his hand as he mumbled, "Petrification." As soon as he said that, a window instantly appeared in front of him. Skill name. Petrification level 100 CE. 32 Attribute. Electrical strength 100 attack. 100 physical resistance. 100 CE resistance. 30 luck. 62 description. This skill will freeze your opponent for a while depending on the user level and electrocute them the entire time. Do you want to use this skill? Yes, but only when I say it. As you wish. To turn it on, just say the word, "Good," said Ed as the window disappeared and an electrical power covered up in his sword. He glanced at the robot. You better be careful. Same to you. Luna changed her stance into that of fighting as she injected her energy into the sword. The latter changed its form all of a sudden. The strong blade slowly became wobbly and waved as it grew longer and longer. The entire blade transformed into a mace thing that grew long enough to make 5 circles around her body, above her head. It continued to grow. I hate this damned weapon, Ed mumbled under his breath. If Dirt was here, I would have admired Dancemaster's skills. The pink sword turned into a long lace was called Dancemaster, a special fire attribute weapon that was supposed to be deadly against the enemies. It would wrap around the opponent, burning them to death, and wouldn't leave until the person was no longer breathing. Of course, this was the reason why Ed hated it, because Dancemaster wouldn't be too much trouble for him. His stats were higher as compared to Luna's. So even if he was captured, he would be able to leave immediately. As expected, the pointed tip of the mace suddenly turned toward him as if it were alive. If it had a face, it would be glaring at Ed and growling at him like some monster. Then it dashed toward him at the fastest speed. Ed smiled. He dodged and hit the weapon, electrocuting it a little. Luna glared at Ed. Why aren't you freezing me? You used the petrification skill, didn't you? This time, the tone of her voice was different. It seemed his brother had stopped controlling the robot. The lace and the electrical sword danced around the open ground surrounded by trees. A palace could be visible at a distance, which made this entire scene enchanting. But Ed knew that this palace was the only area that was filled with greenery. Everything else was either desert or filled with dried land. Ed seemed to be enjoying himself too much as he continued to dodge with a calm face. It even seemed like he wasn't even making an effort, and this entire thing was just meant to entertain him. Just then, a thought occurred in his head as he turned on his live stream. The same number of viewers appeared at once as before. Soon, money started flowing into his account as usual. Then, shocking comments from the viewers also appeared on his screen. Whoa, what the F***ck am I seeing? Luna against Ed. Does she want to die? She's a damned robot. How can she die? Perhaps she wants to get dismantled. This is legendary. Let's save this video. Oh. I can finally see the legendary brothers fighting again. My life is finally meaningful. Ed focused on dodging the lace while continuing to read the comments. This made Luna infuriated as she said with an angry face, "Can't you fight properly? You're not him anymore. So you don't interest me." Ed spoke as if he didn't want to continue talking with a robot. He dodged again as he inserted a little more energy into his sword. Its electrical aura increased even more, and when it touched the lace this time around, the electricity sparked up as it trembled. The electrical power then transferred from the tip of the lace to the hilt, and ultimately to Luna's body. The robot stopped dancing along with the lace as she stood there without moving. Her entire body trembled as she chuckled, "You're just playing with me, aren't you? I don't have time to play with children." Ed stood back at his place, unscathed. "I'm just making money." Chapter 44-43. Blackfire. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Luna's face flushed as she fumed in anger. She stared at the man as she changed her dancing style. This time, her movements seemed a bit more striking. Combined with a sharp expression, it seemed that she was going to dance to her death. The lace also became agitated at this time, instantly surrounding Ed with a fierce attitude. It seemed that she wanted to capture him by hook or by crook. Now, Ed couldn't continue to dodge anymore. "You want to die, don't you? Ed chuckled in amusement. It's amusing seeing you try so hard, the probability of winning against you is almost zero. So I know what I'm doing. Luna also smiled while dancing. I'm just collecting data for my master. Oh. So ruthless. Ed dodged and attacked the lance, making it tremble to the point that it stopped dancing around for a second before regaining its composure. Luna gritted her teeth and continued dancing, but no matter how many times she twisted her body and turned, the lace couldn't even get close to Ed's body. She started to get frustrated as she stopped her attack and stood on her side, staring blankly at her opponent. I'm going to update my data on you. It seems you have gotten stronger. Sure, Ed waved his free hand as if he hadn't heard what she just said. I did level up. The truth was, he never showed his real power level to anyone, not even his brother. He had reached level 100 long back when he was still in Meridio, with his brother, but he never showed his true strength, hiding it from everyone else. If he did, he might end up indirectly challenging his brother at any time. At present, he was using a level 80 strength to fight back. He would just let the system god think that he had upgraded to level 80. When Luna saw this expression, she frowned as if she just thought of something, but shook her head. It seemed she couldn't continue the line of thought for some reason as she turned the lace back into a sword as it disappeared into her body. In that case, Dance Master wouldn't be useful against you anymore. Ah, so you were measuring my level by Dance Master. Ed genuinely praised the girl, and here I thought you were fighting seriously. Luna's weapon changed all of a sudden. 2 axes appeared in her hands with a brown hilt, but the only strangeness was that instead of an iron blade, there was a triangle dot-shaped black fire flickering at the top of both the weapons. She held it in her 2 hands and raised her head. I'll fight for real now. After she said this, she launched an attack on the bald man. Ed frowned when he saw those axes. This was a legendary axe weapon, Black Fire, that would only be used by rich systems above level 90. Of course, lower-level systems could also grab it if they had that much money, but they might end up getting tired too soon while using this weapon. There was a reason why Black Fire was one of the strongest weapons of the fire attribute. It had a black fire coming straight from hell. This fire would be used to destroy the bad karmas of the criminals by burning them within the black fire for a period before releasing them into the reincarnation pool. The black fire was famous for being never-ending even in hell. If someone were to summon it, it would burn the enemy and torture their soul, inflicting innate damage so much so that the poor soul would probably take a long time before becoming a human again. The most dangerous thing was that it would continue to burn away until it was extinguished by the user. If they wouldn't extinguish it, the fire might end up destroying the entire planet, ultimately turning the entire universe into charcoal. Now that Ed saw the girl using this weapon, he smiled. There was a spark of interest appearing in his eyes as he stared at those axes. Now you're talking. This is what I call a fight. The viewers' comment section became even more excited after seeing the scene. What the heck am I seeing? Is that Black Fire? The legendary weapon. Oh. I'm breathing and I can see that weapon with my own eyes. My life's purpose has been fulfilled. Oh my God. That's Black Fire. It's as good as I saw in the pictures. I want that. If King want it right now. Oh, I love Ed Hudson. He's the most handsome bachelor of all. I want to get married to him. The above girl, please stop. He has many fan wives here. If you start, they'll also join, and we action lovers won't have a chance at chatting at all. After that, the comments section went off in another direction. Of course, this had nothing to do with Ed. He and Luna were busy fighting one another to death. They both attacked one another and dodged, but Ed still didn't use his skill until the end. He smiled and said, "You're getting better at fighting." "I learn from the best." Luna attacked again, but the axe in her right hand ended up hitting the tree. She frowned when she saw the black fire burning the entire tree down. TCH. I hate it when this weapon does it. It's destroying my garden. Ed ignored that comment and continued to fight. Even though this was a black fire, he wasn't afraid for one reason: the power level of this weapon was greatly reduced because of Luna's low stats. Even though robots were basically OP and could create fake versions of all the weapons and skills through their bodies within their attributes, they couldn't use a higher level weapon. Even if they created a fake version, the power potency of that weapon would be reduced to that of their current level. Despite that, the fire was still real. Only the attack and CE had changed, and everything else about the fire damage remained the same. The most damaging thing was that there were two black fires. Ed knew he had to be careful. He grinned as he continued to fight. "I've never had so much fun in years. Let's do this again." "I'm sorry, I'm the Queen of Orient. I can't waste my time fighting a mere teacher," said Luna while she summoned back the black fire from the tree and continued to fight. "Oh. Then let's end it," Ed said. He raised his weapon and pointed the top toward the lowly and said with a smile, "Petrification." Chapter 45-44. Please, forgive us. You are listening at novelfull.audio. As soon as he said that, an electric spark more powerful than earlier flew from his body and dashed straight toward Luna. The latter dodged, but the ball of electrical energy turned and twisted toward her, entering her body. At that moment, Luna's entire body froze as if someone had pressed a pause button as it trembled because of being shocked constantly. Her widened eyes stared at Ed in a terrified manner as she had the urge to speak, but couldn't because power was forcing her to stand erect without moving. It was just that her glance said it all. She didn't even have to open her mouth to speak out her grievance. Ed spoke while walking toward the girl. "Tsk, you fell just with one skill attack, despite hiding his power." Ed didn't say those words out loud as he reached toward her and patted her head like an affectionate father and said, "Don't f***ck with me and my little disciple. Get it?" After that, he didn't continue to linger any longer and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Luna continued to stand in her garden for 2 minutes, getting electrocuted. When she finally regained control of her body as the electricity stopped making her tremble, she fell to her knees and raised her head, staring at the place where Ed was standing not too long ago. Her fingers curled into a fist as she chuckled darkly, "You and your disciple better be careful from now on." In the institute. As soon as Ed returned to the virtual portal building and went to the same floor, he saw a group of students standing there in the corridor. They were chit-chatting among themselves. His shoulders relaxed as he glanced around only to find that his little disciple was missing. Well, he had expected that. After all, it would be hard even for a high-level system to pass that level. If Shane had passed it easily, it would have been a serious matter. He glanced at Dirt, who was shaking his head indicating Shane still hadn't come out. Just what the heck was happening there? What none of them knew was that Shane had lost his consciousness by using all of his vital force to run the weapon. Noah already waited for several hours on the stairs, but his system didn't come online. He was getting bored at this time. He had already slept for several hours, and now, he wouldn't want any longer. So he stood up and started to walk upstairs. In any case, he could still turn on the menu. He would be fine even without the system. Didn't he stay alive even after facing so many life and death situations? Noah motivated himself like this as he walked. Just as he reached the topmost floor, he was stopped by a closed door right in front of the staircase. He stared at the door as a feeling of nervousness appeared in his heart. For some reason, his intuition told him not to go inside, but f***ck it. I'll just enter. I'll see what happens after that later, he mumbled to himself and pushed open the door decorated with strange carvings of animals, ears, eyes, and even limbs all around the place, revealing a dark room inside. He had seen enough until now. So that strange door didn't scare him anymore. His eyes sparkled at the thought, did I become strong or something? If I go back to my world, I might end up shocking everyone else. If only you can get back, a voice echoed from the darkness, scaring Noah to death. The latter stopped his feet as he took deep breaths to calm himself down. His entire body trembled from the impact of that voice. How come even the voice of this person is so powerful? I better defeat the boss and get out of here, he thought, but he said nothing. He silently took out his katana and turned on the swordmaster skill from the inventory and said, "Why don't you get away from me? I came here to defeat the boss." A chuckle echoed into the dark that surrounded Noah at once. "Really, you amuse me, Noah. How do you know my name?" The boy was terrified to the extreme now. He couldn't move as his hands holding his katana trembled. "I even know your system and I plan to bring him here. TSK, he is so incompetent, falling unconscious so soon. I couldn't even have a chat with him." The voice sounded as if the person in the dark was really sad. "I'll just kill you now." "No, get the heck out of here. I'm not afraid of you." Noah gripped the katana tightly as he raised his head despite being afraid. He knew that if he didn't fight back, he might end up dying. "Oh." The voice echoed in amusement as a gust of wind flowed toward the boy all of a sudden. Its force continued to increase until Noah couldn't take it anymore. He covered up his face first. "What do you want?" "I won't tell you," said the voice slowly as the gust of wind slowly turned into wind blades, slashing Noah's body into fine pieces. An ear-piercing voice sounded from the dark room as it slowly turned down. After that, only the sound of slashing something could be heard that would make anyone feel a chill down their spines. Too bad. No one was present to witness this scene. The voice in the dark scoffed after looking at the mess. "What a pity. I thought I'd get to meet Shane today. I was told he was the only system with dark cosmic energy in his veins. I wanted to get him on our side." Shane, who was being remembered at this time by several people, finally opened his eyes only to find himself standing in the middle of a desert. He stared at the scene with the sun scorching above his head and frowned. Where was this? He soon got his answer in the form of a pop-up window. "Host, you failed your mission. Your punishment starts now. You have to survive in this desert for 4 days. The time outside will be measured as 10 days in the punishment realm equals 1 day outside. We hope you can survive. Best of luck." What the heck? How did he fail? He had clearly told his host to stay back until he arrived. Why did that damned boy have to head upstairs? The boss must have killed Noah brutally. He pressed his forehead and glanced around. There wasn't something he could find termed as shelter. It was good that he still had his boots, or else he might end up burning his feet with the hot sand beneath. For a moment, he felt sad about his host. Even though that boy was useless and virtual, he was still his first host. He didn't want that person to die. He sighed and took off his shirt, wearing it over his head. 4 days, right. He would definitely survive. Menu. He spoke, but nothing came out. He frowned and called out in a louder voice, "Menu." Another window popped up in front of his eyes. "Menu and inventory won't work until your punishment is fulfilled. Please, forgive us for the inconvenience." Forgive whom? What the F***ck was wrong with this entire system world? Chapter 46-45. He will have to. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The students assembled in the corridor and started murmuring amongst themselves. The noise of their chit-chat echoed in the background. "You're a pet system, right? What exactly did you do in the portal?" "I helped my host take care of his pet," one of the students spoke as he rolled his eyes and wrinkled his nose. "It was a bad experience." "Huh? Why? Wasn't it just taking care of your dog?" "It was an insect. A giant, ugly-looking insect." The student made a vomiting gesture as he shook his head. "I had a hard time controlling myself there." "I got lucky, I guess," said another girl with black hair tied above her head. "I had to sell healing potions to the host during the war. That's it. I'm so jealous of you." I got the job to feed the host." A boy sighed as he said, "It's a good thing my host didn't die of overeating. Don't you think someone's missing here?" "Oh yeah, that boy, Shane isn't here," a girl snickered as she remembered Ed calling him by that name. It wasn't necessary to use their system numbers. It was similar to the official names everyone had, but for unofficial purposes, everyone would usually use their past life's names. He had it coming. Just then, someone kicked her calf, making her yell, "Hey, who dared to kick me?" "I did." Tess glared at the girl as she waved her hair behind her and said, "If you dare to say another word about my brother, I'll kick your ****. Why shouldn't I say anything? He's simply a freak in our system world," said the girl, and the others also nodded. Everyone knows that it's difficult to survive in this place without cosmic energy. He's basically immortal. Even if you did, you would end up living in the desert area. Orient was already a poor continent, and the poorest area where the lower-level systems rented houses for 100 krana a week was in the desert that was situated between the Imperium Institute and the castle of the Queen of Orient, Luna. So if a person wasn't doing well and couldn't level up, he wouldn't be able to grab more opportunities for entering the portal itself. These people would be forced to enter dangerous dungeons for tiny bits of money. Some of them even lost their lives in the process, just for the sake of living in the worst conditions of life. After entering this world for a few days, every one of the students had figured out how important it was to level up and earn money through the live streams. It was just that since everyone had a live stream, it was even more difficult to attract the attention of the viewers. The situation was basically like YouTube where everyone could go live, but only rarely, fortunate people could trend. Was there another way to earn money? Of course, there was. A system could either take up the job and get a regular salary and a regular amount of experience points after passing through different worlds, but for this, they would have to pay a little money to enter the portal every time. So the poor people would still find it difficult to even glance at the virtual portals. What to speak of entering worlds? That was why most of the below-average system families living in the Orient would usually depend on killing monsters and hunting for treasures in dungeons to earn scrap. Since Shane was found to have no energy in his veins, they all assumed that he might end up facing the worst-case scenario. None of them knew about the fact that only his world was in severe difficulty. Tess flared in anger as she glared at the group of students standing in front of her. She felt someone's hands on her shoulders as a familiar cold voice spoke, "Ignore them. These people are useless." "You're right, Frank." Tess took a deep breath and turned toward the cold boy standing behind her. "Let's go wait for him." Just as they were discussing, Ed walked out of the portal room with his hands crossed behind his back. He glanced at the students in the corridor and said, "You can go and rest. Class is dismissed." Tess bit her lips anxiously. Her brother was still inside. How could she calm down? "Where's Shane?" "He's not coming back anytime soon," Dirt answered for his boss as he pulled up Shane's data on his screen and said, "He failed his assignment, and he was sent to the punishment world to spend 4 days. Remember what I told you about how 10 days in the system world equals 1 day outside? So don't expect him to come out anytime soon." Dirt closed the window and said, "Don't worry. He can survive. I suggest you all take your time resting because you will have 2 exams in the future. I would suggest you use the remaining free chances to study for the 2 of your exams because the final test will take place in the real world, though it's still in a few days." What Dirt means is that, Ed took a deep breath and waved his robot to stop the latter from speaking anymore. "You should go back and rest. Focus on your exams while we take care of the rest. The first exam will be hard." Everyone murmured and made fun of Shane for a while before wandering off to the dorms. Only Tess and Frank still stood at that place without moving. Ed sighed and said, "See, I care about Shane too. So go back and rest. I'll stay here." Tessa's eyes moistened, but she didn't cry. She took a deep breath and nodded as Frank patted her shoulders and dragged her away. When everyone was gone, Ed's expression became serious as he glanced back at the room and asked, "Did you track the person who did this?" It was. Dirt hesitated before speaking, "Luna." Ed sneered, "So my brother is really after Shane. Very good. They must have figured out that he can use dark cosmic energy despite having it blocked. We have to find a way to unlock his powers so that he can at least fight monsters and find himself a weapon." Dirt was surprised when he heard this. "Didn't you say he can still use his powers?" Ed shook his head and walked inside the virtual portal, not to his fullest extent. "Whoever locked it, we have no idea if that person was a friend or an enemy. To be on the safe side, we have to unlock it. In any case, Shane won't have to take the attribute test again. So his secret won't be out. Can Shane really survive that?" "He will have to." Ed stared at the portal with a cold face, "otherwise, he wouldn't be my disciple." Chapter 47-46. Leave it to me. You are listening at novelfull.audio. While everyone was waiting for a certain someone, a little away in the desert area, people were walking across the market area, especially a restaurant filled with poor people coming here for a cup of tea. That was all they could afford at the moment while staying here. At one table, two people wearing hoods sat there without speaking to anyone else. Their waists had costly belts that made them the odd men out. The waiter who noticed them sitting smiled and walked over. "May I help you, sirs?" The hooded person on the waiter's right said, "Bring a coffee for me and an ice cream for the lady." The waiter sneaked a glance at the other hooded person and smiled, "Sure. That's a girl. I didn't see it coming. She doesn't look like a girl," he thought. The girl in the hood hit the table with anger in her voice. "You dare? Well, what do you expect from me?" The guy shrugged and sat back. None of their faces were visible at the moment. It seemed there was a fog-dot-like thing in front of their faces that hid them from others. The two of them didn't converse anymore. They sat there without speaking as the guy opened his mouth first. "So, what are your orders?" The woman spoke nothing as she waited for the waiter to arrive there with their orders. She picked up the spoon and ate the ice cream quietly. "You already know what my orders are, don't you?" "I still want to confirm," said the hooded guy, as he frowned, his voice full of doubts. "Why are you after him? Are you sure he is?" "Just do what you're told." The lady gulped the entire ice cream in one go and stood up. "We're done talking. I don't want to hear that you have failed ever again." After that, the girl vanished from that place without a trace. The guy grimaced. She should have paid first. A few hours later. Dirt was still standing inside the portal room. Ed had gone to rest a while ago, leaving him to take care of Shane when the latter arrived. Since Dirt was a robot, he didn't have any concept of getting bored. He sighed as he stood there, staring at the portal blankly. He glanced at the watch on his wrist and shook his head as he muttered under his breath, "What's taking him so much time?" Just then, the entire portal started shaking slightly as if it were about to spit something. Dirt's expressions changed as he immediately walked over and stared at the portal with a serious face. He texted his boss about the changes in the portal and stood there without moving an inch. A body suddenly spat out of the portal's mouth, landing on Dirt headfirst. The latter was thrown back from the impact as his eyes widened. Even Dirt hadn't expected this to happen. He had assumed that the boy would just come walking through the portal, but why was this guy's body thrown outside the punishment area? Just what exactly did he do to end up like this? Dirt pushed Shane off of him and examined the body only to realize that the boy had fallen unconscious at an unknown time. His clothes were tattered and every part of his body was covered with either blood or dust. Injuries formed on every part of his body, making Shane look even more pitiful. Dirt didn't waste any more time before initiating the healing process. Since his attribute wasn't healing, he could only use another method to heal the boy fully. His attribute was so unique that everyone wanted their hands on him when he was created, but his boss got him first and stole him from right under the system god's nose, and the latter couldn't do a thing about it. But still, Dirt couldn't use this healing technique frequently since it used too much of his energy. As long as Shane wasn't in danger, Dirt would just leave it to nature to heal the boy, but at the present moment, it looked like the boy would end up dying any minute if he backed away. So he had no choice but to save him since he was also his boss's first ever disciple. He finished the healing process as Shane woke up with a jolt. The latter blinked as if he were trying to clear his vision as he got up. He rubbed the back of his neck and asked, "I came back. What did you do inside the punishment area?" Shane was in a dazed condition for a while before he turned toward Dirt as he took a deep breath. "Never ever send me to that punishment area with a desert and the flying insects ever again. It's a pain in the a***. Ah, so it was that world. No wonder Shane looked too broken to the point of dying." Dirt shook his head and got up. "Boss is waiting for you. Get up." Shane nodded. Even though he had many questions, he had just survived through 2 dangerous worlds one after another. He was both mentally and emotionally exhausted despite having his body healed. He wanted to just let his body fall on the bed and close his eyes for a few hours. The two of them walked out of the building one after another. Just then, someone bumped them, making Shane stumble back a few steps. He raised his head, and before he could see the person, the latter hugged him, clasping him firmly in an embrace. "Brother." The girl released him and punched him in the stomach. "If you dare do that ever again, I'll kill you with my own 2 hands. Shane, who had just been healed, felt pain as his stomach churned up from the impact. He groaned and rubbed his stomach and asked, "Why are you stronger than me?" "My stats have risen." Tess flipped her hair back as she looked at him smugly, "unlike a certain someone." Shane swallowed back the words he was going to say as he stood speechless at that place. So now basically everyone around him managed to upgrade their stats, only leaving him behind the class. Great. He shook his head. "I'll see you later. I have to see my master." Before anyone could interrupt, Dirt directly brought him to the staff room, inside Ed's cabin. Everyone had their own cabins with their names. Even though Shane hadn't met other teachers yet, they were still present at the moment as he passed by several cabins and entered Ed's. They gave him a strange look when he was entering and murmured amongst themselves, making him feel even stranger. They were surely talking about him, weren't they? Well, he was Ed's first disciple and a failure one at that. People were gossipy in nature. It wasn't that he hadn't expected this. He just wondered whom these teachers taught since all the students were currently under Ed for now. He shrugged and pushed open the door. Ed was flipping through a book while on his seat behind the desk. The room was still the same with boring pictures hanging on the wall about him receiving various awards. There were even photos of Ed teaching students how to fight. Shane didn't spare them a glance and sat in the chair in front of the desk and asked frankly, "What's going on?" "You don't need to worry about it." Ed closed the book and stared at Shane. "You need an attribute weapon." "Duh." Shane rolled his eyes. "Tell me something I don't know." "I have booked a dungeon for you. There's a chance that you'll find your weapon there, but you have to take someone with you." Shane was going to open his mouth when Ed raised his hand. "Not me or Dirt. We don't have time. Take someone from the students. But boss." Dirt opened his mouth. "He can't use his power to the highest extent. That strange power has blocked 80% of his powers, making him rather useless." Shane tilted his head and nodded. That was true. When he had managed to defeat Ed back then, he could still use power, and his body had unexplainable power that made him stronger. If he still had that amount of energy in his veins, perhaps he wouldn't have failed in the previous world. "Let's unlock your power first, shall we?" Ed glanced at Dirt. "I'm sure you can manage this." "Leave it to me," said Dirt as he smiled. Chapter 48-47. Who are you? You are listening at novelfull.audio. The first thing Dirt did was putting up a barrier around the room before glancing at Shane. He spoke something under his breath that Shane assumed would be a skill name, as the robot raised his fingers again, pointing them toward Shane's body. Soon, energy sparked from his fingers and entered Shane's body, making Shane freeze. He even felt his breathing pausing for a second. He couldn't even blink as the divine energy engulfed his body. The next moment, the energy vanished without a trace as if it weren't there in the first place. After that, Shane felt his body becoming energetic all of a sudden. His veins filled with some energy as he realized what he had been missing this entire time. His energy indeed had been sealed inside his body, but thanks to that, he hadn't attracted much attention during the attribute test. It was just that he couldn't continue being a useless fella. Back when his powers were sealed, everyone thought that it was a seal to stop his identity from being revealed. But after the recent phenomenon of someone changing the difficulty of the virtual portal during his time, Shane didn't think so, especially after realizing his powers themselves were sealed. He felt as if someone behind the scene was trying to push him in a certain direction, rendering him useless. Things were changing faster than Shane could think. He felt a trace of lingering fear in his heart after that incident. That was why he wanted to get stronger. Unsealing his powers was the first step toward it. Soon enough, Shane opened his eyes and looked around. He firmly curled his fingers in a fist and grinned, "It feels great." "How did you do it?" Dirt smiled smugly and said, "I won't tell you." Ed rolled his eyes and crossed his hands on his chest, "Now that your powers have unsealed, don't expect my useless robot to help you at all times. You still have to return that sword to me after finding something better." Shane stiffened for a moment before he laughed. "Why?" "Because," Ed narrowed his eyes, "Kinslayer is mine. You can't even use it properly. It has the best effect on one of my skills." Shane groaned, "Can't I just keep using it? I'm your disciple, ain't I? It doesn't mean I'll give you anything. You will get what you deserve. Now, you're dismissed." "Cheapskate," Shane muttered under his breath and walked away. When he was gone, Dirt turned toward his boss and frowned, "Why did you ask for your sword? You don't even need it anymore." Ed shook his head and smiled as if he were thinking of something and said, "You won't understand." "Why?" "Because you don't have the burden of being a master." Dirt looked at his boss and sighed, "You have become old. Get out." At this time, Shane walked toward his dorm with a frown on his forehead. He seemed to be thinking deeply about something, but he didn't know what to do anymore. So there was a helpless emotion floating within his eyes. Just then, he saw a familiar girl coming toward him as he walked down the corridor. "Brother, you're free now, right?" Shane nodded before remembering something and shook his head, "I have to find people to create a group." "For what?" "I have been assigned to go to a dungeon for a weapon." Shane sighed in a helpless manner, "My cheapskate of a master even wanted the weapon back that his robot handed over to me." Tess narrowed her eyes, "Dungeon, you say? Count me in." "You're not coming." Shane replied instantly as he glared at her. He walked past her, directly heading toward the boys' dorm area. This building was meant for the students to live on different floors for both males and females. The latter got the first 2 floors while the remaining boys were left upstairs. So he reached the staircase and started climbing upstairs without turning back. He instantly heard footsteps following behind him. "Shane. I'm going. I'm your sister. That's why I'm stopping you. Go back to your floor. This area belongs to the boys." Shane remembered something and turned around, "You're not coming here wearing that." He pointed at Tessa's chest, which looked puffy and firm, making the girl look even more beautiful. She glared at her brother and flipped back her hair, "Why do you always care about what I wear? You should focus on your own dress code. You look like some nerd from my school." Shane indeed looked like one with his hair falling on his forehead, covering half of his left eye. Back when he was still alive, he would use gel and other hair accessories to make himself look even more handsome, but ever since he arrived, he hadn't been able to do anything in terms of representing himself, making him look worse than the regular boys at his university. He pulled back his hair and said, "I'll purchase some hair gel before going to the dungeon." This is why everyone's been on to you. Even your power level is in the negatives. What else do you expect from others? Tess looked at her brother in a disappointed manner and crossed her arms over her chest, making her chest firmer. They have always been onto the weaker generation. You are giving others an option to go against you. Looks aren't everything, Tess. Shane's brows furrowed when he realized she deliberately changed the topic and glared at her. You're still not going. Come on. Tess stared at the boy with starry eyes and stood in a praying position. Pretty please. I'm stronger than you, and I even have some cool weapons. The students walking past them glanced at the two of them and made strange expressions while walking past Shane. The latter coughed and pressed his sister's hands. Fine. Find someone with you. Easy. Tess instantly opened her menu and contacted someone and grinned before announcing, Frank's coming. Shane was speechless as he stared at his sister. Wait, when did you send him a friend request? No, why didn't you accept my request yet? The menu interface acted similar to modern-day Facebook with a friend request system. Only friends could text one another through the chatting function. Shane sighed and was about to say something when he felt someone tapping his shoulders. He turned around to see a strange, smiling boy standing in front of him, one step above him on the stairs. It seemed that his height was similar to Shane's and that was why he looked even taller at the moment. The boy's wavy brown hair moved as a gust of wind passed by them while the latter stared at Shane with his black eyes and asked, Ahem, I'm sorry for eavesdropping, but I heard you guys are forming a group for a dungeon. May I join? Who are you? Chapter 49-48. Dirt Stats. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Jake Fowler, replied the boy with a lingering smile on his face that felt creepy to the sibling standing in front of him. I have always been in the class behind you. Shane tilted his head as he tried to remember this guy, but he couldn't. He had never focused on anyone else other than Tess and Frank in the first place, and since others were used to making fun of him, he never even tried to socialize with them. Now this guy in front of him was trying to come with him. Shane narrowed his eyes. Do you think I'm a fool? I haven't been able to overcome the shock of failing the first world I ever entered as a system, and now you're forcibly inserting yourself in my talk with my sister. Nope, you're not invited. But if you keep saying another word, I'll suspect you're after my sister. Shane stared at the boy rudely and said, F***ck off. After that, Shane didn't linger around there even a second before storming off with Tess towed behind him. After reaching his room, Tess rudely stopped in front of his door and stopped him. That was rude of you. Then hang me to death. Shane pushed her away as he entered his room and said, You're welcome here if you want to see my underwear lying around on the couch. Ew. Tess made a disgusted expression on her face as she glared at the boy and said, Clean up the room, and I'm going with you. Let me talk to Master Ed. He's not your master, yet, forget it. Shane pressed his fingers onto his forehead and massaged it a bit before lying on the bed. Too much had happened recently, and now that he was finally alone, it all came down on him like a thunderstorm. It was true that he didn't like Noah, but it didn't mean he wanted that boy dead. He was a high schooler. These guys should be expected to act in a ridiculous manner as Noah did. So Shane wasn't too angry with his first virtual host. It was a good thing that it was a virtual world, not a real one. Otherwise, he wouldn't want to see someone dying right in front of his eyes like that. He closed his eyes and drifted off to sleep. When he woke up, it was already the next day. He rubbed his stomach as he groaned and pushed his body to wash up before walking out of his room. He happened to see Frank also coming out of the room adjacent to him, and so he greeted the boy, Good morning. Frank nodded. We're going, right? Going where? For a moment, Shane had forgotten what was going on as he tilted his head before suddenly remembering. He sighed, Okay, maybe you're talking about the dungeon. Fine, but you have to take care of my sister since my stats aren't really that great. As they were walking downstairs, a certain brown-haired boy stared at Shane's back with a calm expression before he smiled and followed them. Shane received the group member list soon enough the moment he entered his classroom. Ed said while facing his class, "Get ready. I'll give you a day off considering your duty for today. The systems I'm calling out, kindly go with him to the dungeon. Dirt will guide you there. 122547112, 122547799, and 122547767. You others, follow me to the grounds. We are going to have practicals today." Shane only remembered his number, so he just shrugged and walked out without thinking. He knew for sure that his sister would follow behind, and since he knew Frank's number, he heard it crystal clear from his master's mouth. So he wasn't surprised except for the last one. He frowned as he turned around, and was just about to speak when he noticed a certain brown-haired boy following Tess and Frank behind with a calm smile on his face. Shane gave the boy an irritated look. "So you are the one forcing yourself into my group? Didn't I tell you I don't want you in? Can't you understand human language?" "No, I'm not a human anymore," said the boy, still smiling. Veins popped up on Shane's forehead as he glared at the boy and was just about to say something when someone coughed. He looked over to find Dirt standing in front of them in the corridor, who nodded expressionlessly at the new boy and said, "He filled out the form after Tess and Frank, and since the boss didn't want more than 4 people this time, he passed Jake on the first-come first-serve basis. Now, follow me." Shane rolled his eyes and decided to ignore a certain brown-haired boy's presence from now on. As they were walking down the corridor and reached the stairs, Dirt tilted his head and glanced at Shane from the corner of his eyes. "Boss has sent a gift for you. You'll like it for sure." "Really?" Shane raised his brows as he checked his message box. He found a text from Ed, and he immediately opened it. There was no explanation and just a file in the attachment section. He immediately opened it up and glanced at the contents. Skill. Stats reader level. 100 CE. 0 attribute. Strength. Attack. Physical resistance. CE resistance. Luck. 84. Below this, he could see a question asking him whether he wanted to save this skill or not. His eyes stuck on the description area of the skill box. It can read the stats of the level mentioned and below. To read the stats of the people above the mentioned level, please upgrade. What the? He could use this skill to read other people's stats. His eyes widened as he immediately used it on Dirt. Level 95 EXP 9,993,875 job. Robot max HP 100/100 max CE 100/100 attribute. Time strength 87 agility 98 stamina 89 intelligence 97 vitality 95 attack 99 skill. Weapons. Physical resistance 75 CE resistance 86 luck 82 overall status. Experienced. A window showing the above things popped up in front of Shane, making him feel like he had been blinded by sheer power level. What the heck was this about time being an attribute? He tilted his head as he glanced at Dirt with a new perception. Shane had no idea that this damned robot was so powerful. Chapter 5049. A Hotel Lobby. You are listening at novelfull.audio. It took them a few minutes to reach the dungeon thanks to Dirt's extraordinary teleportation skill. Even though Shane could see his stats, he still found it marvelous when the robot used that skill for the first time, and Shane accidentally managed to open the stats info of the skill. Name. Teleportation skill level. 100 CE. 20 attribute. Time strength. 100 attack. 0 physical resistance. 100 CE resistance. 100 luck. 89 description. Uses a time warp to transfer one or more bodies to another place at the quickest speed. You can't move more than 10 bodies at the current level. Whoa, your skill is awesome." Those words automatically burst through Shane's mouth when they reached their destination. The five of them were just standing in the corridor a moment ago, and when they blinked, they were already standing surrounded by trees, in front of a cave. Tess raised her brows. "You can see his skill window." Shane stiffened. He glanced at Frank and Jake beside his sister and frantically shook his head. Even though they were his group mates, he still felt strange sharing his powers with others. After the previous experience, he wanted to be cautious around the people he knew. He would explain this to Tess on another day when they were alone. At this time, he just wanted to keep the ability to see other people's stats to himself. After all, it was still strange to be able to peek at other people's powers. No one wanted their powers to be revealed like him. So for now, it was better for him to hide his abilities, especially the dark energy thing. Still, he felt bad for not telling Frank about it. So he opened his mouth and said, "Of course not. Do you think I'm a god?" Tess scoffed and ignored her brother as she glanced at the mouth of the cave. There was a round portal of light blue color. Electric energy flickered now and then, making it look like a wormhole. The portal was all too familiar. Shane narrowed his gaze as he stared at the round thing at the mouth of the cave entrance. He had a bad feeling in his heart when he glanced at it. Last time too, something like this had appeared, but the color immediately changed that time without being noticed. So this time, Shane didn't want to be tricked by the little blue color again. He wanted to be ready to face any challenges thrown at his face. After thinking like this, he took a deep breath and said, "Get your weapons ready. We are going in." None of the people had any other thoughts. Dirt opened his mouth and said, "I'll be staying here and monitoring you guys from the outside. If I find any issues, I'll immediately teleport for help." Shane didn't say another word this time. When he didn't know anything about Dirt's stats, he used to treat the robot really like some dirt placed on the ground that he didn't need to focus too much on, but now things had changed. He couldn't take that robot for granted. He deliberately ignored Dirt as he started walking toward the portal. The latter could tell what was going on as he saw the boy walking stiffly. He smirked and said, "I'm powerful, ain't I?" "Shut up." Shane glanced at Tess and said, "Let's go." After that, the four of them entered the dungeon without hesitation. Dirt sighed as he shook his head and stood in front of the portal. He pulled out a window as he started typing something. He looked exactly like a hacker who had too much work at hand while typing continuously with the help of a holographic keyboard that hovered in the air below the window. Inside the portal, as soon as they entered, they ended up coming across a hotel lobby filled with different people. Some of the tourists had colorful dresses on their bodies as they entered the lobby after Shane and his group with their backpacks while heading toward the receptionist in front of them. The lobby looked exactly like that of a costly place filled with new and exquisite furniture. Everything was either in steel gray or in white color with shades of black. It was just that the language that the people spoke couldn't be understood easily. Everyone was stunned. Even though Shane couldn't be called poor, his family wasn't that rich to afford to book a room at such a posh hotel. This was the first time he had entered such a place despite being a social butterfly in his past life. Tess whistled as she leaned toward her brother, "This is a dungeon." Shane shook his head, "I don't know. It should have been a dungeon." "Let's go and see what happens," Jake spoke, all of a sudden. Shane instantly turned around and glared at the newcomer, "I don't need to ask you for that. I was going to head over to the receptionist." Jake shrugged, "I was just saying we don't have much of a choice." "Shut it." Shane finally turned and walked toward the receptionist. As soon as he reached the desk, the beautiful lady raised her head and the smile on her face froze. Her eyes widened when she glanced at Shane and his team as she stood up to her feet. Then she yelled unknown words at the top of her voice as if she had been frightened to death. Shane looked at the scene in front of him and tilted his head. He glanced around only to find that all the tourists who were chit-chatting a while ago froze and stared at the group without blinking their eyelids. The scene was so creepy that Shane felt a chill down his spine as he took a deep breath. I need a room. It was just an excuse. He wanted to see what was going on here by trying to make an excuse. Sure enough, the receptionist trembled after hearing his voice. Suddenly, her eyes turned red as black veins started to appear on her face. Her hands cracked and split into many hands coming out from her elbows, making her look extremely strange and horrific. Her tongue grew further and split similar to that of a snake's tongue. Hair scattered all over her head as she growled at Shane and his group. Shane turned around only to find that everyone else had gone through a similar change. They transformed into strange creatures with snake tongues and several hands, looking horrific and disgusting at the same time. What the heck is this? Tess was the first one among them to break the silence as she huddled closer to her brother. Strange creatures surrounded them on all sides.